The rain never stops in Portland. Not really. Even when the clouds part and the sun breaks through, there's a dampness that clings to everything. The weathered wood of my front porch, the moss-covered roof shingles, and the hollowed shell of what I once called a marriage. My name is Ezra Caldwell, and 6 months ago I had everything figured out. A respected position at the university teaching architectural history, a century-old craftsman home we'd lovingly restored, and Mara, my wife of 12 years. The woman whose laugh once filled these now silent rooms. I stand at the bay window, watching droplets race down the stained glass panels, blues and ambers catching the fading afternoon light. Outside, the Portland skyline is a smudged watercolor against steel-gray clouds. It's March 25, 2025, and the rain hasn't stopped for 11 days straight. Some kind of record, according to the weather app on my phone. The same phone that now vibrates in my pocket. Another message from Julian Voss, my divorce attorney. My wife's divorce attorney, I should say. Meeting confirmed for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring the financial statements we discussed. Professional. Clip. Nothing in his tone suggesting he's sleeping with my wife. I set my mug of cold coffee on the windowsill and move through the house, our house, trailing my fingers along the wainscoting. Mara and I had stripped 7 layers of paint to reveal the original oak. 3 weeks of evenings spent side by side, her hair tied up in a bandana, cheeks smudged with paint stripper. That was 5 years ago, when we still touched each other without hesitation. The stairs creak under my weight as I climb to our bedroom. Her bedroom now, I suppose, since I've been sleeping in the guest room since January. The scent of her perfume, bergamot and something floral, still hangs in the air. Her closet door stands slightly ajar, clothes missing in irregular gaps like missing teeth in a once perfect smile. She's been gone for 3 days, staying at her sister's place across town. Space to think, she'd said, not meeting my eyes. I don't mean to snoop. That's what I tell myself as I notice her old phone charging on the nightstand. Mara had gotten a new one last month, sleeker with more storage for work photos. She's a real estate agent, specializes in historic homes. That's how we met when I was hunting for this very house. The old phone lights up with a notification. A text. From Julian. She left. Getting papers ready. House is as good as yours already. 2 months tops. My stomach hollows out. I read it again, trying to make the words mean something else. But they don't. Julian isn't texting his client about case strategy. The she is me. And yours means theirs. I set the phone down exactly as I found it, my fingers suddenly numb. The rain drums harder on the roof, an irregular heartbeat matching my own. I sink onto the edge of the bed, our bed, where I'd proposed to Mara on a Sunday morning 12 years ago, ring hidden under her pillow. I always thought betrayal would feel hot, a flash fire of rage. Instead, it's ice water in my veins, crystallizing into something harder and colder by the second. In the bathroom, I splash water on my face and stare at my reflection. 38 years old, with new lines around my eyes that weren't there a year ago. Dark hair with threads of silver at the temples. People say I have kind eyes. Trustworthy eyes. Gullible eyes, perhaps. I descend to the basement, flipping on the single bare bulb that illuminates the stone foundation walls. Mara hates this space, too damp, too dark, which is why I've claimed it as my sanctuary. My workbench runs along one wall, tools neatly arranged. The opposite wall houses our holiday decorations, camping gear, and boxes of memorabilia. I pull down the photo albums, my fingers finding the one from 3 years ago. Our anniversary trip to the coast. As I flip through, a loose photograph slips out, landing face down on the concrete floor. It's not one of ours, the paper is different, glossier. When I turn it over, the cold in my veins turns to ice. Mara, head thrown back in laughter, Julian's arm draped casually around her shoulders. Standing on what appears to be a hotel balcony. The date stamp in the corner reads October 15, 2024, 5 months ago. 2 months before she mentioned divorce. I slide to the floor, back against the damp stone wall, photo trembling in my hand. Above me, the house creaks and groans in the strengthening wind. Rain lashes the small basement windows. And in that moment, as Portland drowns in another record-breaking storm, I make a decision that will change everything. They think I'm the easy one to discard. The naive academic who wouldn't see their betrayal coming. They don't know me at all. I tuck the photo into my pocket and climb the stairs, a plan already forming in my mind. The first move in a game they don't realize we're playing. The rain never stops in Portland. Neither will I. Morning light filters through the stained glass, casting colored shadows across the hardwood floor. I've been awake since 4, sitting in the living room armchair, watching the rain subside for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. The photograph from the basement lies on the coffee table before me, a silent accusation. I remember the day we bought this house 8 years ago. Mara had called it a diamond covered in coal dust. The previous owners had let it deteriorate, peeling wallpaper, sagging porch, leaky roof. But beneath the neglect, we both saw its bones. Solid, enduring, worth saving. Much like I thought our marriage was. I trace my finger along the edge of the photo. Mara's smile seems foreign now, wider, more uninhibited than any expression she's shown me in years. When did that happen? When did I become the person she stopped smiling for? The grandfather clock in the hall, a wedding gift from my parents, chimes 7 times. Julian will expect me in his downtown office at 9. 2 hours to decide what kind of man I want to be. I could confront them both. Throw the photo on his mahogany desk. Watch their carefully constructed story crumble. It would feel good for a moment. But it wouldn't be enough. I make coffee, strong and black, and carry my laptop to the kitchen table. The house feels different this morning, as if it too has awakened to betrayal. The creaks and groans of the old would no longer sound like comfortable sighs but whispered warnings. Trust evidence, not emotion, my doctoral advisor used to say. I need more than one photograph. Julian Voss has represented us, me, for 3 weeks now. Recommended by a colleague as the best divorce attorney in Portland. I'd called him, desperate to save my marriage, hoping mediation might work. Instead, he guided us smoothly toward dissolution. Now I understand why. I type his name into the search bar, scanning past the professional accolades and peer recommendations. I find nothing suspicious until the 5th page of results. A brief mention in a legal blog from 6 years ago, discussing an ethics complaint that was ultimately dismissed. Something about client confidentiality. Not enough to build a case. I close the laptop and move to the window. Across the street, my neighbor Mrs. Alberg is walking her ancient corgi, both of them moving with the same arthritic determination. She waves. I wave back, wondering what she would think if she knew. We're the perfect couple on Hawthorne Lane, the professor and the real estate agent who restored the old Craftsman to its former glory. Appearances, like stained glass, can distort the light. I climb the stairs to Mara's home office, hesitating at the threshold. I've respected her privacy for 12 years. Yet she and Julian didn't respect the sanctity of our marriage. The scales tip. I enter. Her desk is meticulously organized, property listings in labeled folders, contract templates in the drawer, business cards in a vintage letterpress tray. I scan her calendar, finding nothing marked with Julian's name. Of course not. They wouldn't be so careless. But people are creatures of habit. They leave traces. I check the bottom drawer where Mara keeps our rarely used tablet. As I suspected, it's gone. A dedicated device, perhaps? One I wasn't meant to see? My watch shows 7:45. I need to prepare for the meeting, but first I make a detour to the hall closet where I keep my photography equipment, a hobby I'd taken up 5 years ago. Inside a padded case sits my compact security camera, purchased to monitor the house during our trip to Europe last summer. Battery full. Memory clear. I place it on the bookshelf in Mara's office, angled toward her desk, nestled between architectural reference books. The lens is barely visible, a dark pinprick among shadows. It's not illegal to record in your own home in Oregon. I checked. Before leaving, I shower and dress carefully, charcoal suit, light blue shirt, no tie. Professional but not intimidating. The mask of a man who suspects nothing. In the front hall mirror, I practice looking defeated. Shoulders slightly slumped, eyes downcast. It's not entirely an act. Beneath the growing cold determination, something in me is dying. The Ezra who believed in second chances. The Ezra who thought love was enough. I slip the photograph into my inner jacket pocket and grab my keys from the hall table. As I lock the front door, I notice something I missed before. A small scratch on the brass doorknob, fresh enough that it hasn't tarnished. Someone used the wrong key, forced it. Julian has never been to our house. At least, not that I know of. I run my thumb over the scratch, another piece of evidence collecting in my mind. The morning air smells of wet earth and cherry blossoms. Spring in Portland, rebirth amid the decay. I start my car and head downtown, rehearsing ignorance, planning patience. Let them think they're winning. Let them grow confident. In the rearview mirror, the house recedes, its windows like knowing eyes watching me drive away. Within its walls, the camera waits, collecting truths that will soon shatter the shadows in the glass. Julian's law office occupies the 15th floor of a glass tower overlooking the Willamette River. The reception area is all polished marble and abstract art, designed to intimidate clients into submission before they even meet the man himself. "Mr. Caldwell," his assistant says with practiced sympathy. "Mr. Voss will see you now." I follow her down the corridor, past framed law degrees and photographs of Julian shaking hands with Portland's elite. In one, he stands beside the mayor at a charity gala. The caption reads, "Voss Family Law, Fighting for Families Since 2010. The irony isn't lost on me. Julian rises from behind his desk as I enter, extending his hand with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He's exactly as he appears in the photograph with Mara, tall, with carefully styled salt and pepper hair and the confident posture of a man accustomed to winning. "Ezra, good to see you." His handshake is firm, authoritative. "I was just reviewing your case notes." "My case?" "As if my marriage has been reduced to a file number and billable hours." "Have you had a chance to complete the financial disclosure forms?" he asks, gesturing for me to sit. I hand him the folder I've prepared. Everything should be there. Joint accounts, retirement funds, property assessment. He flips through the documents, nodding. "Very thorough. Most clients struggle with this part." "I'm an academic," I say with a self-deprecating smile. "We're good at paperwork if nothing else." Julian laughs, the sound rehearsed. "Mara mentioned you were meticulous." "Mentioned?" Past tense. "They've discussed me beyond the parameters of this case." I keep my expression neutral as rage pools cold in my stomach. "How is she?" I ask, my voice carefully modulated to convey concern rather than suspicion. Julian's gaze flickers to his computer screen, avoiding eye contact. "She's processing." These situations are never easy. No, they're not. The meeting continues with Julian outlining the division of assets, speaking in the measured tones of someone explaining simple concepts to a child. I nod at appropriate intervals, ask predictable questions about timelines and court appearances. "And the house?" I finally ask. Julian leans back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Ah yes, the property on Hawthorne Lane. Given that Mara found the house through her real estate connections and has contributed significantly to its renovation. She wants it," I finish for him. "She feels a strong emotional attachment," he confirms as if this justifies everything. I think of the camera hidden in her office, of the photograph burning in my pocket. "I understand," I say quietly. Relief crosses his features so brief I almost miss it. He thinks I'll surrender without a fight. Good. That'll simplify things considerably. He makes a note on his legal pad. "Now regarding alimony." As he continues, I mentally check out, recalling my conversation with Detective Lila Hensley yesterday afternoon. I'd reached out to her on a pretext, a break-in at a colleague's home, but really to tap her knowledge of local legal circles. We'd met at a coffee shop 6 blocks from the police station, away from prying eyes. Julian Voss? She'd stirred her latte thoughtfully. Reputation for being ruthless but effective. There were rumors a few years back. What kind of rumors? The kind that don't stick to men like him. Her dark eyes had studied me closely. "Why the interest, Professor?" "This about your divorce." I nodded, surprised she knew. "Small city," she'd explained. "My sister works at the courthouse. So you're filing." When I hesitated, she'd leaned forward. "Off the record, Ezra. What's really going on?" Something in her direct gaze had compelled honesty. I showed her the photograph. "How long have you suspected?" she asked, her expression softening with understanding. "Suspected? Weeks. Known for certain? 24 hours. She handed back the photo. "Document everything. Oregon's a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity matters if there's an ethics violation." "Ethics violation?" "Lawyers can't sleep with their clients' spouses," she said bluntly. "Especially not when they've been consulting with both parties. Bar Association takes a dim view." Now, sitting in Julian's office as he outlines how much of my life I should surrender, I think of Lila's parting advice. Don't show your hand too early. People underestimate quiet men. Use that. "Ezra? Are you with me?" Julian's voice cuts through my thoughts. "Sorry? It's a lot to process." He nods sympathetically. "Of course. Take time to review these documents. We can discuss further at our next meeting." He stands, signaling the end of our session. "Mara mentioned she's collecting some personal items from the house tomorrow afternoon. I'll make sure I'm not there," I say, standing as well. "I've got a faculty meeting until 5. Another flash of relief crosses his face. "That's considerate of you." We shake hands, and as I turn to leave, I make my first move. "Julian," I say, pausing at the door. "Thank you for your guidance. I'm glad Mara found someone who understands what she needs. The double meaning hovers between us, but his face reveals nothing. Just doing my job, Ezra. On the elevator ride down, I check my watch. 10:37. By this time tomorrow, the camera will have captured everything I need to bring their carefully constructed world crashing down around them. Outside, the Portland rain has begun again, gentle but persistent. I turn my face up to it, letting it wash away the mask I've worn all morning. The game has begun. The faculty meeting drags on, voices fading into background noise as I check my phone for the 5th time in 20 minutes. The security app shows no movement in Mara's office. She should have arrived by now. Professor Caldwell? Your thoughts on the curriculum changes? I look up to find the department head and 14 colleagues staring at me expectantly. For a moment, I've forgotten where I am, what I'm supposed to be. I think we should consider how these changes align with accreditation requirements, I say, falling back on academic jargon that never fails to launch a tangential discussion. It works. As debate erupts around me, my thoughts return to the house. To the trap I've set. At 3:42, my phone vibrates with a motion alert. I excuse myself, claiming a call from my doctor, and step into the hallway. The security feed shows Mara entering her office, setting down her purse, running her fingers along the edge of her desk. She looks different, makeup perfect, hair freshly highlighted, wearing a dress I've never seen. She's dressed for someone else. I switch the app to record just as another figure enters the frame. Julian. My breath catches as he closes the door behind him. They speak in low tones, inaudible to the camera, but their body language tells the story. The casual touch of his hand on her waist. The way she leans into him, familiar, intimate. They kiss, briefly at first, then with growing intensity. His hands move to the zipper of her dress. I close the app while rising in my throat. I have what I need. More than I needed, if I'm honest. Part of me wanted to be wrong, for there to be some explanation that would preserve a shred of what I thought we had. There isn't. Back in the meeting, I sit silently as colleagues debate course requirements, my mind calculating the next moves. When we finally adjourn at 4:30, I have a plan. First, I need to secure the evidence. I connect to the university's secure server from my office computer and upload the video file along with the photograph, timestamping and documenting both. Then I encrypt a copy onto a flash drive that I tuck into my wallet. Evidence safe, I turn to the next phase. Tech Law Weekly is a newsletter subscribed to by every law firm in Portland. Their anonymous tip line has broken stories on legal malfeasance before. I create a temporary email account and compose a message. Investigating ethical violations at prominent Portland family law firms. Seeking information on attorneys with history of client boundary issues, particularly Julian Voss of Voss Family Law. All sources protected. Not an accusation, just enough to put his name in circulation to make people start asking questions. I send it, then shut down my computer. The rain has intensified by the time I leave campus, sheets of water cascading from gutters as students hurry between buildings, hunched beneath umbrellas. I take the long way home, driving past Julian's office tower, wondering if he's still at my house with my wife. The thought no longer aches as sharply. Anger has cauterized the wound. I park 3 blocks away in the lot behind Powell's bookstore, and walk the rest of the way, letting the rain soak through my jacket. The house is dark when I arrive, no cars in the driveway. They've gone. Inside, the air feels different. Violated. I move through each room methodically, noting what's changed. Mara has taken more clothes, some jewelry, the small Tiffany lamp that was her grandmother's. Nothing of real value, nothing I care about. When I reach her office, I retrieve the camera first, confirming the footage is intact before checking the rest of the room. Her desk has been tidied, files rearranged. On the blotter where she writes her appointments, I notice impressions from her pen, an address I don't recognize, hastily scribbled and torn away. I grab a pencil and lightly shade over the impressions, revealing the full address. 1842 River Place Drive, Apartment 17B. I recognize the building, luxury condominiums overlooking the Willamette, far beyond what Julian could afford on his law practice alone. Someone is bankrolling their future. My phone rings. Detective Hensley. You were right, she says without preamble. Julian Voss has a pattern. A colleague remembered a complaint from 5 years ago, another client's wife. It was settled privately, kept off the record. Can you get me details? Not officially, she pauses. But I have a friend in the records department who owes me a favor. Thank you, Lila. Don't thank me yet, she says. Be careful, Ezra. Men like Voss don't like losing. After we hang up, I sit in the growing darkness of the house, listening to the rain against the windows, the familiar creaking of old wood settling. For 12 years these sounds meant home, safety, Mara and me against the world. Now they're the soundtrack to my unraveling life, and the beginning of my carefully orchestrated revenge. I pour myself 2 fingers of whiskey and open my laptop. Time to move a piece directly at Julian's king. An anonymous email to the managing partners at Voss Family Law. Does Julian Voss maintain appropriate professional boundaries with divorce clients and their spouses? Evidence suggests otherwise. Inquire about case #FR2071C and Mara Caldwell. Sent. Checkmate begins. The Multnomah County Courthouse stands as a monument to justice, or at least the appearance of it. Its marble columns and vaulted ceilings designed to make ordinary citizens feel small in the presence of the law. Today, as I climb the steps beneath a rare clear April sky, I feel anything but diminished. 3 weeks have passed since I sent those emails. 3 weeks of careful preparation, of watching Julian's carefully constructed world begin to fray at the edges. The legal community in Portland is small. Rumors spread like wildfire in drought conditions. Mr. Caldwell. A voice stops me at the top of the stairs. Sharon Webb, the lawyer I hired 2 days after discovering the affair. She's everything Julian isn't. Unassuming, direct, with 20 years of family law experience and a reputation for quiet devastation in the courtroom. They've just arrived, she says, nodding toward the parking structure across the street. Are you ready for this? I adjust my tie, somber navy against crisp white. Absolutely. We walk together through security and down the echoing corridor to courtroom 7. Julian and Mara are already inside, heads bent in conversation. They look up as we enter, their expressions shifting from confidence to confusion at the sight of Sharon beside me. What's this? Julian stands, his voice carrying across the nearly empty courtroom. I wasn't informed of a change in representation. Sharon smiles placidly. Notice was filed yesterday afternoon, Mr. Voss. Perhaps check your inbox more regularly. I catch Mara's eye across the room. She looks away first, tugging nervously at the sleeve of her cream-colored blouse. She knows something is wrong but can't quite place what. Judge Harriet Kimball enters, a silver-haired woman with piercing eyes that seem to evaluate and catalog every person in her courtroom. We rise, then sit at her instruction. I understand we're here for asset division in the Caldwell dissolution, she says, reviewing the file before her. I also note a late change in representation for the respondent. Yes, Your Honor, Sharon says. And we have a motion to present before proceedings continue. Julian shifts in his seat, a minuscule tell. He's not used to losing control of a narrative. Proceed, Counselor, Judge Kimball says. Sharon rises, placing a folder on the bench. Your Honor, we have evidence of an inappropriate relationship between opposing counsel and petitioner, which began prior to the filing of this dissolution and continues to this day. This constitutes a clear violation of Oregon State Bar Rule of Professional Conduct 4.2 and warrants immediate removal of Mr. Voss as counsel in this matter. The judge's eyebrows rise fractionally. That's a serious allegation, Ms. Webb. With serious evidence to support it, Your Honor. Julian is on his feet now. This is absurd, Your Honor. A desperate tactic. I haven't recognized you, Mr. Voss, Judge Kimball says sharply. You'll have your turn. The courtroom falls silent. Mara stares at me, her facade cracking to reveal genuine fear. She never expected this, expected me to fight back with anything more than wounded dignity. Sharon hands the judge a sealed envelope. Photographic and video evidence, Your Honor, with documentation of dates and timestamps. All obtained legally within Mr. Caldwell's residence. Judge Kimball opens the envelope, reviews its contents with an impassive expression, then looks directly at Julian. Mr. Voss, are you familiar with the contents of this envelope? Julian straightens his tie. Without seeing them, I can't comment, Your Honor. Then perhaps you should review them. She hands the envelope to her clerk, who delivers it to Julian. I watch as he opens it, his composure slipping as he flips through the photographs I've printed. Still frames from the video showing him and Mara in her office. His face pales, then flushes with anger. Mara leans over to see, her hand flying to her mouth. Ezra, she whispers, loud enough to carry in the quiet room. How could you? The irony of her question makes something cold and hard twist inside me. How could I what, Mara? Document the truth? Judge Kimball clears her throat. Mr. Voss, do you dispute the authenticity of these images? Julian recovers quickly, professional training kicking in. Your Honor, while I don't dispute their authenticity, they don't prove any ethical violation. My relationship with Ms. Caldwell began after I was retained as her counsel. It's the response I expected. Sharon nods to me and I remove the flash drive from my pocket, handing it to her. We anticipated this position, Your Honor, Sharon says. The final piece of evidence is a recording from October 22, 2024, in which Mr. Voss and Mrs. Caldwell discuss retaining his services for a divorce, 3 months before the official filing and during the period they were conducting an affair. Julian's face goes completely still. Mara looks as though she might be sick. Judge Kimball's expression hardens. I'll review this evidence in chambers. This hearing is recessed for 30 minutes. She rises, taking the flash drive with her. As the door to her chambers closes, Julian turns to me, rage barely contained beneath his professional veneer. You've made a serious mistake, he says quietly. I meet his gaze without flinching. No, Julian. I've simply learned from yours. Mara reaches for her water glass with trembling fingers. You don't understand what you're doing, she says. This changes nothing. I lean back in my chair, the weight of the past months lifting slightly from my shoulders. This changes everything, Mara. This is just the beginning. And as we sit in silence, waiting for the judge to return, I think about the house, standing empty today, its century-old beams and bones bearing witness to a history of families made and broken, of truths hidden and revealed. Just like us. The aftermath of the hearing unfolds like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Judge Kimball returns from chambers, face set in grim lines, and delivers her verdict. Julian is removed from the case effective immediately, with a recommendation to the Oregon State Bar for disciplinary review. Mara is given 7 days to find new representation. All shared assets are frozen pending further investigation. In the span of 30 minutes, their carefully plotted future collapses. I drive home through cherry blossoms drifting like pink snow across the streets of Portland. The victory tastes hollow, metallic, necessary but unsatisfying. At a stoplight, my phone buzzes with a text from Lila. Heard what happened. Call me if you need anything. I don't respond. There's more work to be done. The house is quiet when I arrive, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight that streams through the windows. I loosen my tie and pour a glass of water, settling into the kitchen to review notes from Sharon about next steps. The doorbell interrupts my thoughts. Through the beveled glass panels of the front door, I make out 2 familiar silhouettes, tall and rigid, perfectly composed even on my doorstep. My parents. I haven't seen Lillian and Victor Caldwell in 8 months, not since their last tense visit. Not since Mara began subtly turning them against me, poisoning the already troubled waters of our relationship. I open the door, bracing myself. Ezra. My mother doesn't attempt to hug me, simply brushes past into the hallway, the scent of her expensive perfume filling the space. We've been trying to reach you. My father follows, nodding curtly. He looks older, the lines around his mouth deeper, but his posture remains military straight, the retired admiral who never truly left the Navy behind. I've been busy, I say, leading them to the living room. Would you like something to drink? This isn't a social call, my father says, remaining standing while my mother perches on the edge of the sofa. Mara called us. Of course she did. I sit in the armchair facing them both. Did she tell you about the hearing today? She told us you're trying to destroy her, my mother says, her voice sharp as cut glass. And Julian, that you've fabricated evidence, that you're being vindictive. I laugh, the sound surprising even me. Fabricated? That's rich. This isn't like you, Ezra, my father says. Stooping to such tactics. We raised you better. The familiar disappointment in his tone, the same one that colored my childhood achievements, my career choice, my marriage, ignites something cold and clarifying within me. When exactly, I ask carefully, did you speak to Mara? My mother shifts, smoothing her already immaculate slacks. We've been in regular contact. Since when? Since she reached out in December, my father says. She was concerned about you. Said you'd grown distant, unreasonable. December. Before the divorce filing. Before I knew anything was wrong. And you believed her without speaking to me. She's always been the reasonable one in your marriage, my mother says. The one who makes an effort with us. I stand, moving to the window, needing distance. Outside, the cherry blossoms continue to fall, oblivious to the Cold War being waged in my living room. Did you know she was having an affair with the divorce lawyer? That they were planning to take this house, the house I restored with my own hands, while leaving me with nothing? My parents exchange a glance, a silent communication honed by 40 years of marriage. Marriages end, Ezra, My father says stiffly. Adults handle it with dignity, not vendettas. She asked for our help, my mother adds. She's devastated by what you're putting her through. I turn back to them, suddenly seeing the situation with perfect clarity. She asked for more than your emotional support, didn't she? What did you give her, Dad? Money for the divorce? For Julian's legal fees? The slight tightening around my father's eyes confirms it. You're financing their legal battle against your own son? I say, the words falling like stones between us. What? Because she's the daughter you wished you had? Because she plays the role of perfect wife in public, while betraying me in private? That's enough, my father snaps. We came here to talk sense into you, to get you to drop these vicious tactics before you destroy any chance of salvaging your reputation. My reputation? I laugh again, harsher this time. You've never cared about who I actually am, only how I appear to your friends at the country club. My mother stands, gathering her designer handbag. We can see this visit was a mistake. When you're ready to behave rationally, call us. As they move toward the door, a memory surfaces, finding a bank statement in Mara's desk 3 weeks ago, a wire transfer from an account I didn't recognize. $50,000. I'd assumed it was from her parents. Wait, I say, following them. The transfer on March 30th. That was you, wasn't it? Directly to Julian's firm. The momentary freeze in my father's stride is all the confirmation I need. That money is frozen now, I say. Along with everything else. Judge's orders. My father turns, his expression cold. You've made your choice, Ezra. Don't expect us to support it. The door closes behind them with a decisive click. Alone again, I return to the living room, sinking onto the sofa my mother had occupied. Another betrayal to add to the growing collection. The parents who should have been my allies, turned against me by the woman I'd trusted with my life. I pick up my phone and text Lila. Can we meet tomorrow? I need your help with something. Her reply comes instantly. Name the time and place. Outside, the last of the cherry blossoms drift to the ground, their brief beauty fading, making way for what comes next. Lila chooses the meeting place, a small coffee shop in the Pearl District where exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture create an atmosphere of cultivated casualness. Far from the courthouse, far from Julian's office, far from anyone who might recognize us together. You look better, she says, sliding into the chair across from me, rain droplets still glistening in her dark hair. More focused. I am, I admit, pushing a cup of black coffee toward her. Clearer about what needs to happen. She wraps her hands around the mug, studying me with the careful assessment that must serve her well as a detective. And what exactly does need to happen, Ezra? Julian needs to face consequences. Real ones, not just a slap on the wrist from the court. Lila sips her coffee, considering. You mean the Bar Association? I nod. Judge Kimball's recommendation was a start, but disciplinary reviews can take months, even years. They can be buried, minimized, especially for someone with Julian's connections. I have the evidence from the hearing, I say. But I need more, a pattern, not an isolated incident. Like the case from 5 years ago. Exactly. I lean forward. You said your friend in records might help. Lila sets down her mug, her expression guarded. This walks a fine line, Ezra. I can't access confidential records for personal vendettas. It's not personal, I say, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. It's about protecting other clients from what I went through. About professional ethics. She doesn't believe me, her slight frown says as much, but she reaches into her bag anyway, sliding a manila folder across the table. My friend found this in the archives. Case number FR 2071C. It was settled out of court, sealed by judicial order, but the initial complaint remains part of the public record. The folder contains a single document, a complaint filed against Julian Voss by Gregory Wilson, alleging that Julian had engaged in an inappropriate relationship with Wilson's wife while representing him in divorce proceedings. The complaint was withdrawn 2 weeks later. No explanation given. There's more, Lila says quietly. Madeline Wilson died 3 months after this was filed. Car accident on Highway 30. Single vehicle, late night, high blood alcohol level. I look up sharply. You think it's connected? Lila shrugs. I think people with secrets sometimes make desperate choices. I photograph the document with my phone, then slide the folder back to her. Thank you. This helps. What are you planning, Ezra? I don't answer directly. Did you know the Oregon State Bar has an anonymous ethics hotline? They take reports of misconduct very seriously, especially when there's documentary evidence. Lila's expression darkens. Be careful. Men like Julian don't fall without taking others down with them. I know what I'm doing. Do you? She leans forward. Revenge burns everything it touches, Ezra. Even the hand that holds the match. Her concern touches something in me, a fracture line in the cold resolve I've maintained these past weeks. For a moment, I glimpse another path, one where I simply walk away, start fresh somewhere else. But then I remember Julian's smug confidence in the courtroom, Mara's calculating betrayal, my parents' willing complicity in their scheme. I appreciate your concern, I say finally. But this isn't just about revenge anymore. It's about justice. Lila sighs, recognizing the immovability in my tone. Just, be careful. And call me if things get complicated. We part ways outside the coffee shop, the spring rain falling steadily now, turning Portland streets into mirrors reflecting the gray sky above. I walk the 6 blocks to the Central Post Office, where I mail a package to the Oregon State Bar Association, complete with video evidence, Julian's prior complaint, and a detailed timeline establishing the pattern of misconduct. 2 days later, the storm breaks. The email from Sharon arrives at 9:17 in the morning. Oregon Bar has expedited the disciplinary review. Emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow. Julian served with notice this morning. I stand at my office window at the university, watching students cross the quad below, their lives untouched by the calculated destruction I've set in motion. For a moment, a flicker of doubt crosses my mind. Is this who I want to be? The architect of another man's downfall? But isn't that exactly what Julian and Mara planned for me? The hearing itself is closed to the public, but Sharon keeps me informed through terse text updates. Julian arrives with 2 attorneys. The video evidence is presented. The prior complaint is entered into record. 3 hours of testimony. And then, just after 4 in the afternoon, the decisive message. License suspended immediately pending full investigation. Likely permanent disbarment to follow. I cancel my remaining office hours and drive home through the clearing weather, the afternoon sun breaking through clouds, casting long shadows across the city. There's a strange hollowness to this victory, a sense of completion without satisfaction. The house is silent when I arrive, but there's an unfamiliar car parked across the street, a black sedan with tinted windows. I'm halfway up the front steps when my phone rings. Mara. I answer, saying nothing, waiting. How could you? Her voice trembles with rage or tears or both. You've destroyed him. Destroyed everything we worked for. You mean everything you plotted? I keep my voice even. Everything you betrayed me for? You don't understand what you've done, she says, softer now, almost threatening. This isn't over, Ezra. Where are you, Mara? Pause. Why? Because there's someone watching the house. A black sedan across the street. Her sharp intake of breath tells me everything I need to know. Mara, who is it? Who else is involved in this? But the line is already dead. I turn back to look at the sedan, but it's pulling away, tires hissing on the wet asphalt, disappearing around the corner before I can make out the license plate. Inside the house, I lock the door behind me and check each room, each closet, each window. Everything is as I left it, and yet the space feels altered, as if the walls themselves have absorbed the escalating tensions of the past days. The bar has fallen. Julian is finished. But Mara's warning echoes in my mind. This isn't over. And the black sedan suggests she might be right. Victory should taste sweeter than this. A week has passed since Julian's license was suspended. 7 days of silence from Mara, of no further sightings of the black sedan, of messages from Sharon confirming that our position in the divorce proceedings has strengthened considerably. The wheel has turned. I should feel vindicated. Instead, I wander through the house like a ghost, touching familiar surfaces, listening to the creaks and sighs of old wood, searching for something I can't name. The local legal community has erupted with the scandal. Julian Voss, rising star, ethical disaster. His firm has distanced themselves, removing his name from their website, issuing carefully worded statements about upholding professional standards. Former clients are reviewing their cases, looking for similar improprieties. The man is radioactive now. I should feel something. Satisfaction. Relief. Instead, I feel hollow, as if the anger that propelled me forward has burned itself out, leaving behind only charred emptiness. Tonight, rain taps against the windows as I move from room to room, turning on lights, then turning them off again. In Mara's office, now stripped of her personal items, I sit at her desk and run my fingers along the worn edge of the blotter. 12 years of marriage. How did we come to this? My phone vibrates. Lila. Need to talk. Something's come up. Can you meet tomorrow? I reply with a time and place, then continue my restless circuit of the house. In the living room, I notice the empty spaces on the bookshelves where Mara's novels and biographies once stood. In the kitchen, her favorite mug is missing from the rack by the coffee maker. Small absences that somehow make the space feel less like home and more like a museum of what once was. Upstairs, I pause at the threshold of our bedroom, my bedroom now. The sheets are rumpled from my fitful sleep, books stacked on what was once her nightstand. I haven't changed anything else. Haven't erased her presence entirely. What? The house phone rings, startling in the silence. Few people have this number anymore. I consider letting it go to voicemail, but something pulls me down the stairs to the kitchen where the old-fashioned landline sits on the counter. Hello. Silence, then a sharp click, then the dial tone. I replace the receiver slowly, unease creeping along my spine. I check the caller ID, unknown caller. At the front windows I pull back the curtain, scanning the street. No unfamiliar cars, no shadowy figures. Just the empty sidewalk glistening with rain under the streetlights. I double-check the locks, set the security system, and pour myself a glass of bourbon, just enough to dull the edges of my paranoia. In the living room, I sink into the armchair and close my eyes, letting the familiar sounds of the house wash over me. Sleep comes unexpectedly, and with it, dreams of Mara. Not the Mara who betrayed me, but the one I met 13 years ago, laughing as we toured this house for the first time, her hand warm in mine as we imagined our future within these walls. I wake with a start to the sound of my phone. Morning light filters through the windows. I've spent the entire night in the chair, neck stiff, mouth dry. The message is from an unknown number. You were right about Julian. But there's so much more you don't know. Meet me at Washington Park, near the Rose Garden entrance. Noon today. No signature, but it can only be Mara. I shower, dress, and force myself to eat something, all the while debating whether to go. Could be a trap. Or a desperate attempt at reconciliation. Or something else entirely. I text Lila. Rain check on our meeting? Something's come up. Her reply is immediate. Everything okay? I don't answer. I'm not sure what the truth is anymore. Washington Park is quiet for a Saturday, the lingering morning rain having discouraged all but the most determined joggers and dog walkers. I arrive early, parking near the tennis courts and walking the winding path to the rose garden. The roses aren't in bloom yet, just thorny stems with the promise of summer beauty still months away. I wait on a bench with a clear view of the entrance, checking my watch, scanning faces. At 5 minutes past noon, I begin to think she isn't coming. At 10 past, I'm certain of it. I stand to leave when I notice a manila envelope on the bench beside me. It wasn't there when I sat down. Someone placed it there without me noticing. Inside is a single sheet of paper with an address in Lake Oswego, one of Portland's wealthiest suburbs, and a time, 8 p.m. Below that, a handwritten note in Mara's familiar script. If you want to know who's really pulling the strings, be there. Come alone. Don't tell anyone, especially not your detective friend. They have eyes everywhere. I fold the paper, tuck it into my jacket pocket, and walk swiftly back to my car, fighting the sensation of being watched from every shadow. At home, I pace the empty rooms, weighing my options. The rational choice would be to tell Lila, to have backup, to approach whatever this is with caution. But if Mara is right, if they do have eyes everywhere, then I might lose my only chance to understand what's really happening. As evening approaches, I make my decision. I load the address into my GPS, check that my phone is fully charged, and text Sharon. If you don't hear from me by midnight, contact Detective Lila Hensley. Then I step out into the gathering darkness, leaving the empty rooms behind me, moving toward whatever truth awaits in Lake Oswego. The game has changed. The real players are finally showing themselves. Lake Oswego glows with privilege. Manicured lawns, luxury cars, security systems advertising their presence with small blinking lights. The address leads me to a sprawling Tudor-style mansion set back from the road, partially hidden by towering cedars. Iron gates stand open, an invitation or a trap. I kill the engine but remain in my car, scanning the property. 3 other vehicles are parked in the circular driveway, a Mercedes sedan, a Range Rover, and Julian's Audi. My stomach tightens. Whatever this is, he's involved. The front door opens as I approach, revealing not Mara but Julian himself, looking considerably worse than when I last saw him in court. His crisp suits have been replaced by rumpled khakis and a wrinkled button-down. His eyes are bloodshot, his usual confidence fractured. "Caldwell," he says, voice flat. "She said you'd come." I pause at the threshold. "Where is she?" He steps aside, gesturing me in. "Study. End of the hall." The house smells of old money, leather, beeswax, subtle cologne. Family portraits line the walls, generations of stern-faced men and reserved women staring down at me as I follow Julian through the foyer. None of these people are Julian or Mara. Whose house is this? The study door stands ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Julian pauses before it. For what it's worth, he says quietly, I didn't know it would go this far. Before I can ask what he means, he pushes the door open and steps aside. Mara sits in a leather armchair, wearing the green dress I gave her for our 10th anniversary. Her hair is pulled back severely, her makeup perfect, armor against whatever is coming. Across from her sits an older man I don't recognize, silver-haired and elegant in a tailored suit despite the late hour. Ezra, Mara says, her voice strained. Thank you for coming. The older man rises, extending his hand. Mr. Caldwell. Victor Blackwood. I believe we have matters to discuss. The name registers immediately. Victor Blackwood, one of Portland's wealthiest developers, owner of half the city's skyline, known for ruthless business tactics and political connections. I've never met him, but his reputation precedes him. I shake his hand, noting the cold firmness of his grip. What matters would those be? Blackwood gestures to a chair. Please sit. Julian, you may go. Julian hesitates, glancing at Mara, who refuses to meet his eyes. Then he leaves, closing the door behind him. Bourbon? Blackwood asks, already pouring 3 glasses without waiting for my answer. I remain standing. I'd prefer answers. Why am I here? Blackwood sets a glass before the empty chair. You're here because you've become an unexpected obstacle, Mr. Caldwell. One I'd prefer to address directly rather than remove. The threat hangs in the air between us. Mara shifts uncomfortably in her seat. Obstacle to what, exactly? I ask. Progress. Development. The future of Portland. Blackwood indicates a large map spread across his desk, marked with red circles and familiar locations. Your house sits on a very valuable piece of land, Mr. Caldwell. Understanding dawns cold and clear. This was never about the divorce, was it? This was about property acquisition. Smart man, Blackwood smiles without warmth. I need that block, your block, to complete the Hawthorne redevelopment project. 42 properties, 41 already secured. Yours is the last. I look at Mara, whose eyes are fixed on her untouched bourbon. And you recruited my wife to help you get it. Mara came to work for my real estate division 3 years ago, Blackwood says. She showed remarkable adaptability. 3 years, I repeat, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. So our entire life together these past 3 years was a means to an end, Blackwood finishes for me. Nothing personal, I assure you. I turn to Mara. And Julian? Was he part of this from the beginning too? She finally meets my gaze. Julian was brought in last year. We needed someone who could ensure the property transfer went smoothly during the divorce. Until you complicated matters with your little investigation, Blackwood adds, his tone hardening. Cost me a valuable legal asset. I take a step toward the desk, anger replacing shock. So what now? You think you can threaten me into giving up my home? On the contrary, Blackwood says smoothly, lifting a document from his desk. I have something far more compelling than threats. Mara? She reaches into her purse and produces a folded paper, placing it on the table between us. It's a deed transfer, Ezra. With your signature. I stare at the document in disbelief. That's not possible. I never signed anything. It's an excellent forgery, Blackwood concedes. One that would withstand considerable legal scrutiny. My mind races. No court would. Courts can be influenced, Blackwood interrupts. Especially when the document is supported by testimony from your estranged wife and parents. My parents. The final betrayal clicks into place. The $50,000. They're involved in this too. Lillian and Victor proved quite amenable to reason, Blackwood says. The Admiral has political aspirations that align with my interests. I pick up the forged deed, examining the perfect recreation of my signature. Why show me this? Why not just file it? Because scorched earth benefits no one, Blackwood replies. I'm offering you a clean alternative. $1 million. You sign the real deed, this forgery disappears and you walk away. Start fresh somewhere else. Mara leans forward. It's a good offer, Ezra. Better than you deserve after what you did to Julian. I look between them, the calculating developer, the wife who's been lying to me for 3 years, and feel something crystallize within me. Not rage, not despair, but absolute clarity. I'll need time to consider, I say, pocketing the forged document before either can object. Blackwood frowns. 24 hours, Mr. Caldwell. Not a minute more. As I turn to leave, Mara catches my arm. Ezra, please. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I look down at her hand on my sleeve, then into her eyes, the eyes I once believed held nothing but love for me. You already did that, Mara. For 3 years. Outside, the night air feels cleansing after the poisonous atmosphere of Blackwood's study. I drive away slowly, watching the mansion recede in my rearview mirror. The forged deed burns in my pocket. Evidence of a conspiracy far beyond what I had imagined, reaching into my family, into the city's power structure itself. I take out my phone and call Lila. I need your help, I tell her. Tonight. What's happened? She asks, instantly alert. Everything, I answer. And it's so much worse than we thought. This goes well beyond fraud, Lila says, examining the forged deed under my kitchen lights. This is criminal conspiracy. It's just past midnight. Rain drums against the windows, a fitting soundtrack to the storm brewing around us. The forged document lies between us on the table like a poisonous thing. Can you prove it's fake? I ask. She nods slowly. Forensic document examination would catch this. But Blackwood's right. If your parents and Mara all testify that you signed it willingly. She trails off, the implication clear. Then it becomes my word against theirs, I finish. Against theirs and one of Portland's most powerful men. Lila runs a hand through her hair, frustration evident. Victor Blackwood has judges in his pocket, Ezra. District attorneys too. That's how he's operated for decades. I pace the kitchen, mind racing. There has to be something we can do. Some way to prove what they're planning. We need more than this forgery, Lila agrees. We need evidence of the conspiracy itself. Communications between Blackwood and Mara, between them and your parents. My parents? I interrupt, a memory surfacing. When they visited, my mother had her laptop with her. She was working on something while my father and I argued. Would she have emails? Documents? She manages all their personal affairs, including financial matters. If there's a record of their dealings with Blackwood, she'd have it. Lila straightens. When did you last speak to them? Not since they left here. But I know where they're staying, the Heathman Hotel downtown. They always book the same suite when they visit Portland. She checks her watch. It's late, but not too late to pay them a visit. Especially if it's their own son, concerned about their recent argument. I understand immediately. A reconciliation attempt. They might believe that, especially if I hint that I'm reconsidering my position on the house. Exactly. And while you're making amends? I look for evidence, I finish. Lila nods. I'll drive separately, stay in the lobby as backup. If anything feels wrong, you walk away immediately. These people have already shown they'll go to extreme lengths. 30 minutes later, I stand outside my parents' hotel suite, heart pounding. The Heathman's plush carpet muffles my footsteps, the elegant hallway empty at this hour. I straighten my jacket and knock. Long moments pass before I hear movement inside. The door opens to reveal my father, dressed in a hotel robe, confusion giving way to suspicion on his face. Ezra? What are you doing here at this hour? I affect an expression of emotional exhaustion, not difficult under the circumstances. I need to talk, Dad. About everything that's happening. Can I come in? He hesitates, then steps aside. Your mother's asleep. That's fine. It's you I wanted to speak with anyway. The suite is spacious, with a separate bedroom door closed tight. In the living area, my father's briefcase sits beside my mother's laptop on the desk. Bingo. What's this about? He asks, keeping his voice low. I sink onto the sofa, running my hands over my face. I met with Blackwood tonight. His expression doesn't change, but his posture stiffens. I see. He made an offer for the house. A substantial one. And I'm considering it. I meet his eyes. But before I decide, I need to understand why my own parents would side against me. Why you'd fund Mara and Julian against your own son. My father sits across from me, his military bearing never wavering even in a bathrobe. You've never understood the bigger picture, Ezra. You cling to the past, old houses, old books, old ideas. The Hawthorne Project is the future of Portland. So you admit you're involved? We're investors, he says simply. The returns will fund our retirement and leave a substantial inheritance. For you eventually if you'd stop fighting this. I lean forward. You forged my signature on a legal document, Dad. That's a felony. No one forged anything, he says, but his eyes shift away briefly. If there's a document with your signature, you must have signed it. Is that the story you'll tell in court? Under oath. He stands abruptly. I think you should leave. I rise as well, hands raised placatingly. I just want to understand. I'm trying to make the right decision here. The right decision is to take Blackwood's offer and start fresh, he says. This crusade of yours has already caused enough damage. I move toward the door, pausing by the desk. May I use the bathroom before I go? It's a long drive back. He gestures impatiently toward a door near the bedroom. As soon as it closes behind me, I press my ear to the wall, listening. His footsteps move away, followed by the quiet clink of ice in a glass. He's pouring himself a drink. Moving silently, I slip back into the main room, keeping the bathroom door closed. My father stands at the window, back to me, tumbler in hand. I ease my mother's laptop into my jacket, heart thundering in my chest, and return to the bathroom. I flush, run the tap, then emerge. Thanks, Dad. I'll think about what you said. He nods stiffly. Call Blackwood in the morning. And this Ezra. In the elevator, I text Lila. Got it? Meeting you at the car. We drive separately back to my house, paranoia making me check my rearview mirror at every turn. No black sedans, no followers that I can detect. At home, with doors locked and curtains drawn, we power up my mother's laptop. It's password protected, but Lila has software that makes quick work of it. Within the hour, we're scrolling through folders of emails and documents. And there it is, the entire conspiracy laid bare. Emails between my mother and Blackwood dating back 3 years. Financial transfers. Meeting notes. Discussions about how to persuade me to sell, and when that failed, how to leverage the divorce. This is everything we need, Lila says, her face grim. Enough to bring to my captain, maybe even the FBI. This crosses multiple jurisdictions, involves multiple crimes. I stare at the email thread where my mother and Blackwood discuss the forged deed, my father's reluctance, Mara's reassurances. My own family, I whisper. How could they? Lila places her hand over mine. I'm sorry, Ezra. As dawn breaks over Portland, we compile the evidence, make copies, store everything securely. The house creaks around us, solid and steadfast, the walls that have stood for over a century bearing witness to this final betrayal, and the reckoning to come. The storm that sweeps in from the Pacific is record-breaking, 60-mile-per-hour winds, torrential rain, flash flood warnings across Portland. Trees topple onto power lines, transformers explode in blue-white bursts, and the city descends into darkness. Perfect weather for a showdown. Lila left at dawn with copies of everything, emails, financial records, the forged deed, heading straight to a trusted FBI contact. Stay put, she instructed. Don't engage with any of them until I call you. But as evening falls and the storm intensifies, headlights sweep across my living room walls. A car pulling into my driveway. Then another. I move to the window, staying hidden behind the curtain. Mara's BMW. Julian's Audi. No sign of Blackwood or my parents, but the message is clear. They're not waiting for my answer. My phone buzzes with a text from Lila. FBI reviewing evidence. Stay away from house if possible. Coming with backup. Too late for that. The pounding on my front door echoes like thunder. I don't answer. Let them think I'm not home. Ezra. Mara's voice, barely audible over the howling wind. We know you're in there. We need to talk. I remain silent, moving through the darkened house to the kitchen. The power is out, but I know every inch of this place by heart. Every creaking floorboard, every squeaking hinge. Glass shatters, the small window beside the front door. A hand reaches through, fumbling for the lock. I grab my phone and retreat to the basement, locking the door behind me. The storm has flooded the space with an inch of water, but the workbench remains dry. I crouch behind it, dialing Lila. They're here, I whisper when she answers. Mara and Julian. Breaking in. Police are 10 minutes out, she says, her voice tight with urgency. I'm closer. Stay hidden. Above me, footsteps spread through the house. Doors opening, closing. Searching. Where's the laptop, Ezra? Mara's voice calls out, closer now. We know you took it from your parents. I scroll through my phone to the folder where I've backed up key documents from my mother's laptop. Quickly, I email everything to Sharon, to Lila's FBI contact, to the editor of the Oregonian. Insurance in case this doesn't end well. The basement door rattles. He's down there, Julian's voice slurred slightly. Drinking again or something stronger. Ezra, Mara calls through the door. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The forgery was just leverage. The offer is real, $1 million. take it and disappear. Rain lashes against the small basement windows, wind howling through the house like a living entity. Water continues rising around my feet, cold and insistent. What does Blackwood want with this neighborhood anyway? I call back, trying to keep them talking, buying time. Why these houses specifically? A pause, then Mara answers, the spring. The natural aquifer beneath this block. Hawthorne Pure, bottled water from Portland's historic underground spring. Worth billions once the houses are cleared and the facility built. The pieces click into place. Why this block? Why our house was so crucial? The old maps in the Historical Society archives mentioned an underground spring, capped when the neighborhood was developed a century ago. You'd destroy a historic neighborhood for bottled water? I can't keep the disgust from my voice. For progress, she insists. For the future. You've always been stuck in the past, Ezra. That's why we could never last. The basement door splinters, Julian's shoulder slamming against it. One more hit and the old wood gives way completely. He stumbles down the stairs, flashlight beam dancing wildly with Mara close behind. Where is it? Julian demands, his face transformed by rage and desperation. The laptop, the documents, all of it. Gone, I say, rising from behind the workbench. Copied and distributed. The FBI has everything. Mara's face drains of color. You're lying. Check your phone, I tell her. It'll be hitting the news any minute now. Julian lunges forward, grabbing my shirt. You've ruined everything. I don't fight back. Don't need to. The basement window shatters inward and a voice shouts through the storm, police. Hands where I can see them. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as officers pour into the basement. Julian releases me, stepping back, hands raised. Mara stands frozen, phone in hand, her expression shifting from disbelief to defeat as she scrolls through breaking news alerts. Lila appears at the bottom of the stairs, badge in hand, directing officers. Her eyes find mine. You okay? I nod, watching as Julian and Mara are handcuffed and read their rights. Breaking and entering, attempted assault, conspiracy to commit fraud. Just the beginning of their charges. As they're led away, Mara pauses beside me. This isn't just about us, Ezra. Blackwood won't stop. He never does. Neither do I tell her quietly. Outside, the storm continues its assault on Portland, but the rain feels cleansing now as I stand on my porch watching police cars pull away. Lila remains, speaking into her radio, coordinating with FBI agents now moving to arrest Blackwood and my parents. It's not over yet, she warns me, rejoining me on the porch. The legal battles, the depositions, the trials, it'll take months, maybe years. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating the old houses along my street. Homes that would have been demolished, families displaced, history erased. All for profit disguised as progress. I have time, I say. And I'm not going anywhere. In the distance, sirens wail, barely audible over the thundering storm. The reckoning has begun, sweeping through Portland like the deluge itself, washing away the carefully constructed lies, exposing the truth beneath. The house creaks and groans around us, battered but unbowed by the fiercest storm in decades. Just like its owner. Summer in Portland. Sunshine spills across hardwood floors, warming the house that has weathered so much. 3 months have passed since the night of the storm, since Mara and Julian were led away in handcuffs, since the elaborate conspiracy began to unravel like a poorly knitted sweater. I stand at the bay window, coffee in hand, watching my neighbor Mrs. Alberg walk her corgi across the street. She waves. I wave back. Small gestures of normalcy in a life that has been anything but normal. The headlines have faded now, relegated to the inner pages of the Oregonian. Blackwood empire crumbles, and developer faces federal charges and land fraud scheme, no longer command the front page. Portland has moved on to newer scandals, fresher outrage. But the aftermath continues, spreading outward like ripples in still water. Victor Blackwood, released on $2 million bail, awaits trial on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted bribery of public officials. His company's stock has plummeted, his political allies have scattered like cockroaches in sudden light. The Hawthorne Pure bottled water project is dead, the aquifer beneath our neighborhood now protected by emergency historic designation. Julian had accepted a plea deal, trading testimony against Blackwood for reduced charges. Disbarred permanently, he left Portland last month. For Seattle, I'm told, to start over. My parents fled to their winter home in Arizona, awaiting their own legal fate. My mother's emails proved devastating, explicitly detailing their role in the scheme. The Admiral's political aspirations have vanished like morning fog. I haven't spoken to them since that night at the Heathman. Perhaps someday, but not yet. Some betrayals require time to heal if they ever do. And Mara, my wife, soon to be my ex-wife once the divorce proceedings conclude. She sits across from me now at the kitchen table, signing the final papers Sharon has prepared. No contested assets. No alimony. A clean break. Her cooperation in the case against Blackwood has earned her leniency, probation rather than prison time. I never wanted it to go this far, she says quietly, not meeting my eyes as she signs her name one last time. It started so simply. Just a job at his real estate company, showing properties in neighborhoods he was interested in. When did it change? I ask, not sure if I really want to know but needing to hear it anyway. She sets down the pen. 2 years in. He called me to his office, said he had bigger plans for me. For us. She gestures vaguely at the house around us. He knew about your attachment to this place, said it would be the hardest to acquire. Asked if I'd be willing to help, persuade you. By sleeping with our divorce lawyer? She winces. Julian was already Blackwood's man. The affair, that wasn't planned. Just happened. Weakness, I guess. 2 people drowning in the same secrets. I don't respond. What is there to say? The woman I loved, thought I loved, never truly existed. She gathers her purse, our business concluded. At the door she pauses. For what it's worth, I did love you once. Before all of this. After she's gone, I move through the rooms of the house, touching familiar surfaces, listening to its sounds. The afternoon light catches in the stained glass, casting blue and amber patterns across the floor. The same patterns that enchanted us when we first stepped inside 13 years ago. The doorbell rings. Lila right on time. All finished? She asks, stepping inside. Signed, sealed, and soon to be delivered, I confirm, leading her to the kitchen where a bottle of champagne waits. Sharon says the divorce will be final by the end of the month. Lila smiles as I pour 2 glasses. To new beginnings, she says. And to old houses, I add. We clink glasses and move to the back porch, settling into Adirondack chairs to watch the summer evening descend. The neighborhood children play in sprinklers, their laughter carrying on the warm air. Gardens bloom in riotous color. Life continues, ordinary and extraordinary at once. What will you do now? Lila asks. With the house, I mean. I consider the question. In the months since the arrests, I've received 3 offers from developers, all rebuffed. Keep it. Restore it. Maybe finish the projects Mara and I started but never completed. Alone? I glance at her, catching the hint of something in her voice that makes me pause. For now. But I'm beginning to think houses, like people, are meant to be shared. She smiles, turning her gaze back to the garden where fireflies have begun to rise from the grass, tiny lanterns against the gathering dusk. The grandfather clock in the hall chimes 8 times. The house stands solid around us, its century-old beams and bones bearing witness to this moment of quiet peace after so much turmoil. Betrayal uncovered, justice in progress, wounds beginning to heal. You know, Lila says thoughtfully, most people would have sold after everything that happened. Taken the money, started fresh somewhere else. I shake my head. This house is more than wood and glass. It's a testament to endurance. To standing firm when the storm comes. She raises her glass. To standing firm. As night falls gently over Portland, I think of all that's been lost and all that remains. The house I kept. The truth I uncovered. The future still waiting to be built, one careful day at a time. Some storms leave destruction in their wake. Others wash the world clean, making room for new growth, new possibilities. This house stands. And so do I.